Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today I can genuinely say this is the most excited. Not only have I ever been for a deck tech, this is the most excited I've ever been for a commander or a deck in my life. I kind of spoiled it a little bit last week. I hinted at it. This week I'm talking about Yawgmoth Thran Physician. If you guys know anything about me, I've talked about it on the channel before. I love Infect, I love Phyrexia, I love all the lore behind it, I love the mechanic of it, I just love everything about Phyrexia. And Yawgmoth has always been one of the characters in Magic I found the most interesting, and I've always loved and just been intrigued by Yawgmoth. And the crazy thing is specifically what he was before he became that big demon kind of all-powerful creature. And the fact that we not only got a Yawgmoth card, but we got him in his human form. It's literally everything I've ever wanted in a Magic card, and I can genuinely say, when I saw it spoiled, it took me not even 2 minutes before I started going on, buying all the cards for the deck, putting the deck list together. I can genuinely say I've never been this excited for a card before. So much so that I even went and drew my own little proxy, which you can see now, and I mean, my art skills are just amazing, obviously, but I got to test this deck out quite a bit this weekend, and not only is the flavor of the card, the art, the lore of the card amazing, but the deck is pretty amazing itself. So Yawgmoth is 2 and 2 black for a 2/4 human cleric, obviously legendary creature, with some really interesting abilities. Well, first he has protection from humans, which maybe that's a thing in Modern. I know humans is a deck, so maybe that's relevant. One thing that I did see come up this past weekend from playing is that protects it from Brea, which is a pretty popular commander. Brea is a human, so that was pretty cool, because I know Brea is one of those commanders that can get frustrating because she could just pick off all of your commanders. So that was a small interaction. So it's an effect that can have some relevancy. It's something that can be important. Now the second ability, which is probably the one I'm most excited about, is you just pay a life, sack another creature, and it lets you draw a card and then place a -1/-1 counter on target creature. This is the funniest thing was when I first read this, I saw this and I was like, oh, maybe you can kind of build it like a pottery. You can put in, some -1 counter synergies like a Blowfly Infestation or a Crumbling Ashes, something like that. But when I actually played this deck in practice, the card draw and the sacking abilities were so powerful. Half the time I literally was forgetting I could just put -1 counters on things to kill things. It was that ridiculous. So this second ability, you have so much flexibility too. You can lean into those -1 counter strategy cards. You can lean into the card draw. You can lean into the sacking. There's so many options. And then this last ability is what makes Yawgmoth just the perfect card for everyone who just loves Phyrexia as much as I do. And you can just simply pay 2 black mana, discard a card from your hand, and proliferate. This ability is insane because they just go together. You can draw a ton of cards with them. All of a sudden you have all these cards in hand. You can just dump mana, dump your cards, and proliferate everywhere. Now some people are going to have ideas. You can do this with Planeswalkers. You can do this with -1 or +1 counters. And obviously for someone who loves Phyrexia as much as I do, you can do this with Infect. Now taking a look at the creatures, we're going to break these creatures down into a few categories. The first category I have to talk about are token creators. When you have a commander like this where you want to be sacking creatures, token creators are huge. You want to be able to have tons of tokens on the board, have sack fodder, and basically just at any time be able to just say, okay, we're going to sack a bunch of stuff, get our value, and not have to worry about sacking high value, important creatures that you want to keep on the board. The first token producer I'm going to talk about is Abhorrent Overlord. Abhorrent Overlord is insane. You get this big flying demon thing, and you get a 1/1 harpy for every black pip or your devotion to black on the battlefield. And as well, black's one of those colors where creatures, permanents, whether in their enchantments, they all have a lot of black mana symbols. It's what makes some of the more powerful black cards hard to play in other decks is you need lots of colored mana to play it. But with cards like this, the payoff is just massive. You get this giant flying demon and a whole bunch of just harpy tokens everywhere to use as sack fodder for everything else. Probably my favorite token creator in the entire deck is Endrick Sar. This card is just broken in this deck. Endrick Sar says whenever you cast a creature spell, which we have a lot of, you get to put X 1/1 thralls onto the battlefield where X is the creature's CMC. And then when you get to 7 or more thralls, you just sack Endrick Sar. Not a lot of decks. This is great. You get a bunch of thralls and then Endrick Sar is just going to die. I had a turn this past weekend where I just was able to keep casting creatures You get to like 6 thralls, sack them all, get all this card draw, get all this sacking value. Oh, then I'm just gonna cast another creature, get a whole bunch more thralls, and you can just keep sacking them so they never get to that 7 mark. And all of a sudden, you just have this endless engine of sack fodder getting thrown out with this endless card draw. With a lot of these token effects, you're essentially just going to have a Yawgmoth's bargain, which is banned on the battlefield at all times with Yawgmoth. A couple more token generators I have to talk about. The next one is Hangerback Walker. This one is crazy. This one just synergizes just too well. Hangerback Walker, you get to pay XX, and it comes in with X +1 counters. You tap it to put a +1 counter. When it dies, you get a Thopter for each +1 counter. This does everything. It creates tokens when it dies, so it's a great sack target because you're going to sack it and just get more creatures. But on top of that, it's a proliferation target. This card at any stage of the game, if you're at the point where you're sacking stuff to draw cards and get value, perfect. You're going to have a whole bunch of fodder. If you're at the part where you want to be proliferating things, it's a great target to proliferate because just in case you need more fuel, you can just start sacking stuff and just filling your hand right back up. And then the last token generator I'm going to talk about is Noosegraph Mob. This card is a staple in any zombie deck, and it is just so powerful in this deck. You cast it, it comes in with 5 +1 counters, then whenever a player casts a spell, take off a +1 counter, throw out a zombie. So this basically means, especially with this proliferate that we have just stapled onto our commander here, keep on putting +1 counters. People casting stuff, just keep on getting zombies. This could turn into just essentially an endless stream of zombies. And the best thing about our commander is, sack a zombie, you're going to get to draw a card. With black, you're going to have tons of mana because of all the ramp. Just discard the card you just drew, get another +1 counter. Essentially, you get so many sack triggers. And when you get cards for value, which, spoiler alert, it's the next category, all of a sudden you're draining opponents, you're making them sack stuff. Stuff is just getting bad for your opponents. So that's going to be the next category. We're going to talk about cards that want your creatures to die to get value off of that. So that's going to be cards like Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, Vindictive Vampire. It's really a whole class of cards. Even a Death Greeter, which doesn't drain people, but it lets you gain that life back that you're paying with your commander. All of a sudden, this goes from a Yawgmoth's bargain to, you're just going to draw cards. Forget paying the life. We don't even care if the creatures die because we want them to die so we can drain everybody. It just turns into, you know what? I feel like drawing 5 cards this turn. Let's draw 5 cards. And that's really what it felt like. This was insane. It just felt like at any point in time, I just drew as many cards as I wanted. And it was good. Half the time, I wasn't even getting punished for it because of cards like this. Not to mention, Vindictive Vampire deals damage. That means if you give this card Infect, and there may be a way to do that, spoiler alert, we'll get into that. All of a sudden, sacking creatures can just start infecting people out. The last category I want to talk about is taking full advantage of his third ability, being able to discard cards and proliferate. Well, I already mentioned that proliferate. Infect, for me, is the way to go with that. When I see proliferate, especially in a repeatable way like this, the first thing I think about is Infect. Speaking of Infect, the first one, this is no surprise. This has gotten super expensive. I don't understand how it's so expensive, but Blightsteel Colossus. This is just one of my favorite cards of all time. It's just big, Phyrexian, and mean, and I love it. And I put it in any deck I can, but it just fits perfectly in here. For a deck that can create tons of mana, sometimes you need to dump it into something. What better to dump it into than a giant 11/11 trample, infect, indestructible creature? And if Blightsteel's not enough, we're going to be running Skittles too. Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon. It's perfect. You get this out, it's a 4/4. You can give it haste, swing in the air, and just start putting infect counters onto players. Speaking of putting infect counters onto players, Icarats. This is a card I'm going to get into a little bit later to get more into detail of how I use it, but it just ETBs and puts an infect counter on everybody. And when you can put infect counters on people without combat, that's extremely scary. And the last card I'm going to talk about also goes with this last ability, and it's Archfiend of Ifnir. This was a card when I saw it released in Amonkhet. I thought that ability was so powerful, but I just could never find a deck where I could play enough cycling cards to take advantage of it. And I don't really like the whole discard reanimator theme. For whatever reason, nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't kind of what I found enjoyable. So I really never found a deck that I felt like this fit well in. But this deck, it is just too perfect for a multitude of reasons. And when I was playing this card, I found it useful in spots I didn't think it would be. When this is out, you draw so many cards with Yawgmoth that if you don't get a Reliquary Tower or a Thought Vessel out, you're discarding down to hand size at the end of your turn a lot. Normally, you're like, oh great, I have to discard some cards. With Archfiend out, it's not a bad thing. If you have 9 cards in hand, all of a sudden you just threw 2/-1 counters on everyone else's creatures. And that's the minimum, because if you start using his ability to proliferate, you might be discarding 3, 4, 5 cards in a turn. All of a sudden, not only are you proliferating to get value and all of a sudden build up those infect counters and those +1 counters of your planeswalkers, all of a sudden it's a one-sided board wipe for everyone else. And it gets around indestructible because they're -1 counters. This card will shut down the board if other players are playing creature decks. Moving on to the enchantments, there's a few that we're running in any sack deck you're going to want. Cards like Black Market, Grave Pact, and Dictate of Erebos. Shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. That's the type of thing where in any deck where you have your creatures dying a lot, you're going to be running these type of effects to get extra value when all your stuff's dying. The next one I'm going to talk about is Nest of Scarabs. Nest of Scarabs essentially just turns into Yawgmoth's bargain as long as you have creatures to place the -1 counters on. This is ridiculous because you're just placing -1 counters. Oh, let me just get an insect. Then I can sack that insect, pay life. Oh, let me go throw another -1 counter to get another insect. And you can just keep going, and then you put the -1 counters on the insect. This literally just turns into pay a life, draw a card as many times as you want. And this is a 3-mana enchantment. This deck gets into a lot of these situations where all of a sudden you're just in a spot where I feel like drawing until I don't want to draw anymore. And half the time people can't stop you because it's an instant speed ability, and if they do try, just activate it even more. The next one I have to talk about is Tombstone Stairwell. This is a strange old card that I just absolutely love. Tombstone Stairwell is a strange old card. It basically it has one of those cumulative upkeep costs, and everyone's upkeep, they get to put a number of 2/2 zombies onto the battlefield for each creature in their graveyard. And then at the end of the turn, they all die. Super interesting for a number of reasons. One, it's a universal effect, so people might not immediately kill it because they're like, ooh, I get something out of it too. But the more interesting part to me is the fact that those creatures die. A lot of cards more recently printed will say you get stuff that's exiled at the end of the turn. These creatures die, meaning you're going to get all those death triggers we were just talking about. So if you all of a sudden have a Grave Pact and stuff out, or if you all of a sudden have, your Blood Artist or something, and you have a bunch of creatures in your graveyard, which you will, stuff gets crazy because all of a sudden there's, you can easily have 10 to 15 creature cards in your graveyard, all those triggers on the stack, everyone losing life, you're gaining life, everyone's sacking creatures, and stuff gets silly way too fast. And then the last enchantment I'm going to talk about is Glistening Oil, and this is just that theme that I was talking about, the Phyrexian theme I feel like you need in this deck. You could give one of your creatures Infect and swing it, but the way I want to use this is when someone plays a big threat, I'm going to go ahead and give them a Glistening Oil on it. And you know what? Do whatever you want. You have a giant just piece of just Infect perfection, this just Phyrexian beauty. Do whatever you want with it. You can swing at me, swing at anybody, and it just makes me so happy. I'm just trying to get everyone to buy into this just Phyrexian perfection. I want everyone playing Infect, and I'm going to get the whole table in on it, and Glistening Oil is perfect for that. You just find the biggest, scariest creature, give it a Glistening Oil, sit back, and then just watch what happens. Looking at the instance, basically the same thing I just said. The only instant we're running is Tainted Strike, and it's the same exact thing. I almost never want to use this on my own creature. I want to sit back, hold it in my hand, and then all of a sudden someone's swinging at somebody else with a giant, scary creature. I'm just throwing in, giving it 1+1/+0 in Infect. And it's amazing. It's useful because you get those Infect counters on people so you can proliferate them. But two, it is just, it makes me so happy to all of a sudden see both players just be shocked when all of a sudden someone just took 10 Infect they weren't expecting it to take, and neither player just has any idea what just happened. We are running a Planeswalker. Because of the proliferate, you can't go very heavy into Planeswalkers. I chose not to, and we're running Liliana of the Dark Realms. Liliana of the Dark Realms is great for ramp, great for getting your lands. You get a plus it, just go get a swamp. You can buff or minus something, and we're running cards like Skittles that basically if you buff the Skittles with this, that just might take a player out. And if you get that minus, which we can with proliferate, that ultimate, you're going to have more mana than you ever know what to do with. Looking at the artifacts, it's really just a lot of ramp. We're going to be running the altars, Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar. It's a mono-colored deck, so we can run a card like Caged Sun, some mana rocks, nothing too crazy in the artifacts. Taking a look at the sorceries, there's a couple that go really well with Yawgmoth discard theme. You're going to have Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. One so on theme, the Yawgmoth card, and it's affordable Yawgmoth card. Some of the ones are a little bit more expensive or banned. This one's affordable, and it has Yawgmoth in the art. We had to put it in. But I would say like 90% of the reason I forced this card in is the art is beautiful. Just a couple more sorceries I have to talk about. One is Caress of Phyrexia. Again, so on theme and so good. This card can function as card draw if you really need it, because you can give someone 3 poison counters. You're never proliferating your own poison counters, and I doubt anyone else is playing Infect. So You could run this, target yourself, draw 3 cards in an emergency, and how we're really going to be using this is, use Skittles, use Icarats, proliferate a few times. Someone's sitting at like maybe 7 infect, just 7, and they feel safe. Yawgmoth's not on the board. He's been kind of taxed out. You can't cast him. What are you going to do? You're going to just give them 3 poison counters, let them draw some cards to feel better about it as they just ooze out poison and die. The last sorcerer I have to talk about is it's so cool in this deck how it works, and it's Awaken the Erstwhile. I'm not going to lie, when I first saw this card revealed in this last Ravnica block, I thought it was terrible. I was like, what in the world were they thinking? Because everyone discards their hands and makes a bunch of zombies, but all of a sudden you just made everyone discard their hands, and they got a bunch of zombies, and you have a bunch of zombies. They're just going to swing at you and be like, why'd you make us do that? And everyone's stuck top decking, and it just didn't seem fun. And it may not be fun for everyone else still, but it's going to be great for you, because what you can do is, if you have a bunch of cards in hand, or any cards in hand, make everyone discard their hand. Because one of the things with mono black is you don't have counter spells. You don't have really ways to protect yourself. If you're trying to do something and someone's playing blue and just countering your stuff, it can get really hard. How do you deal with that? You make sure they don't have anything to counter with. That's how you do that. Everyone discards their hands. Everyone's got a bunch of 2/2s. You have a bunch of 2/2s. But you have a commander where you can stack all those 2/2s and get your whole hand right back. All of a sudden, you have a huge hand of cards. No one else has a hand. And yeah, they're going to be swinging at you with some 2/2s, but with the tokens we have in this deck and with a handful of cards, I think you'll be able to deal with it just fine. At the lands, I love the lands in this deck. So nothing surprising at all with mono black. We have Cabal Stronghold, Cabal Coffers, Urborg, we have Crypt of Agadine, Phyrexian Tower, basically all the basic black lands you need, and the ability to ramp insanely between getting there's a game where I had a Nykthos and a Cabal Coffers out, and you have so many basic swamps and so many black pips that I was just choosing how much mana I wanted to make, essentially, and mana was never trouble, and it is, the synergies within black to ramp are just so powerful, and these lands just basically signify that perfectly. I will say, you can see it on here, I made sure to run all new Phyrexia swamps in this deck. I know snow-covered lands are the new big thing for monocolored decks because they're reprinting them. I had to make sure I was on theme, and I made sure Phyrexia was well represented, even in the basic lands. Alright, so now it is time for the best part with this deck. Just the most satisfying part is the game-winning step. How are we going to win the game with Yawgmoth? How are we going to spread our Phyrexian infection to everybody else and just make sure by the end of this game, everyone is just dripping Phyrexian oozy oil everywhere? Well, I'm about to get into that right now. By far, my favorite way to win the game, and it's a weird, very convoluted, very inefficient combo. Essentially what we're going to do is play the Icarats. We're going to try to do this in one turn, give everyone a poison counter, and then start sacking our creatures to draw cards, and then using our mana to discard these cards and proliferate. You need the 3 mana to play the Icarats, and you need 18 mana to then discard 9 cards and proliferate 9 times and kill the entire table. Might sound ridiculous, but again, when you get Nykthos and Cabal Coffers, or you have a Crypt cast out, tons of ways to make insane amounts of mana in this deck, you'll find a way, and when you can all of a sudden, you might just be sitting there laying back, got some tokens, and then all of a sudden, the whole table is just choking on poison. It feels so good. The next way to win the game is really just a war of attrition. You're going to be using those Blood Artist effects, those Zulaport Cutthroat effects, and just basically you're going to be sacking so many creatures, and then with Grave Packed out, everyone's creatures are going to be gone. You just essentially drain everyone slowly and painfully. That aristocrat style, especially in a deck like this, can really work well when your commander is that sack outlet. Now this next way is a whole lot more explosive and a whole lot more fast. And it's Gary, guys. It is Gary, the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Gary's so strong in a deck that is mono black with so many black mana symbols. If Gary gets out, especially if you can recur him, that game's just going to end fast. And this next way to win the game is kind of just more of an emergency situation. Anything that's going to be a card you're going to be running, like an Exsanguinate or a Torment of Hailfire. And essentially, you don't have enough of a board state. Things haven't been going well. You couldn't set everything up. But in mono black, if you live long enough, you're going to have access to a lot of mana. Dump it all into here, and you might just take out the whole table by accident, essentially. I'm sure you guys know how powerful these cards are. And the last way to win the game, to me, is actually the best way, and it is the most on-theme way, and it's by using a mix of Tainted Strike and Glistening Oil. Essentially, the whole goal for me is to find any spot in the game where I can get one player to kill another player using Infect. Technically, that's not winning the whole game, but if I get someone to kill somebody else using Infect, to me, that's a win. I don't care what anyone else says. That is a win to me. If I could just get somebody to give it infect, take someone else out, and just spread that Phyrexian infection, there's nothing I could ever want more out of Magic. That's going to do it for this week's deck tech. I really hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Let me know who you guys think is the coolest commander coming out of this set. There's some really strong options, obviously, and some kind of just different ones, like some that open up new strategies. So I would love to hear what you guys think, and I will see you guys next time.